From the very beginning, Lucas had been different. While other children filled their afternoons with noisy games and endless chatter, Lucas preferred the quiet rhythm of the woods. He would wander along dirt paths no one else dared to take, stopping to watch the way sunlight filtered through the trees, or how the wind seemed to carry whispers only he could hear. But this love for silence made him a target. At school, his classmates didn't see a boy with a gentle soul. They saw someone weak, someone strange. The teasing started small: snickers when he answered a question in class, whispers about the way he spoke softly instead of loudly. But over time, the cruelty grew sharper. By the 7th grade, Lucas wasn't just ignored. He was mocked, shoved, and labeled with names designed to sting. Forest freak, they called him. Bear boy. At first, he tried to laugh it off, but every word carved a little deeper into him. Soon, the boy who once loved exploring the world around him began shrinking into himself, convinced he didn't belong anywhere. What the others didn't know was that Lucas carried a secret, one that no insult could erase. Because deep in the woods, beyond the trails and far from town, lived something no one else believed was real. It was massive, with dark fur that shimmered like midnight and eyes that seemed to hold entire stories inside them. To most people, it would have been terrifying, something to run from. But to Lucas, it was the only thing in the world that ever made him feel safe. The bear had appeared years earlier, when Lucas was just a child wandering too far from home. He had stumbled, scraped his knee, and through tears spotted a shadow moving among the trees. At first, he thought it was a monster. But instead of danger, he found comfort. The bear didn't harm him. It simply watched, patient and steady, until Lucas's sobs quieted. From that day on, whenever life felt unbearable, Lucas returned to the forest, and somehow, the bear was always there. To him, the animal wasn't a threat. It was a guardian. He would sit for hours, talking softly, as though the creature could understand every word. And maybe, in some unexplainable way, it did. The bond they shared was not built on fear, but on trust, something Lucas had never found with people his own age. Yet no one knew this part of his life. At school, he kept silent, afraid that if he ever spoke about the bear, they'd laugh louder, mock harder, and make him feel smaller than he already did. So he carried the secret alone, never realizing that one day, it wouldn't just be a comfort. It would change everything. Because the moment Lucas thought he had reached his breaking point, when the bullies pushed too far, the world would finally see what he had always known. A boy may seem powerless, but with a bear by his side, he was anything but weak. Lucas never hated learning. In fact, he loved books, especially the kind that told stories about survival in the wild, about explorers who found themselves lost but discovered strength they never knew they had. He could lose hours in the library, tracing words with his fingers as though they were guiding him somewhere far away. But the moment the bell rang and he stepped into the crowded hallways, his world collapsed. The noise, the laughter, the groups of kids who never let him in. It all reminded him of what he wasn't. The worst of it came from Darren and his group of friends. They had ruled the schoolyard for years, finding their power in numbers and in the fear they planted in others. For them, Lucas was an easy target. He never fought back, never raised his voice, never even looked them in the eye. That made the game funnier for them, teasing someone who couldn't or wouldn't defend himself. "Hey, bear boy," Darren sneered one morning, loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. He had overheard Lucas once, months earlier, speaking quietly to a teacher about his love for animals. That single word, bear, had been all it took to craft a cruel nickname that spread like wildfire. The others howled with laughter. "Careful," another added. "He might bring his pet bear to class." Lucas lowered his gaze and kept walking, his hands gripping the straps of his backpack. He had learned that any reaction only fed them. If he ignored them, maybe they would get bored. But they never did. They shoved him into lockers, scattered his notebooks, whispered stories about how he lived in a cave. And while other kids laughed along, no one ever stepped in. At lunch, Lucas sat alone at the far corner of the cafeteria. He picked at his food while watching others trade jokes and make plans for the weekend. He couldn't remember the last time someone had invited him anywhere. His world was isolation, until the final bell rang, and he could escape to where he truly belonged. The forest. It wasn't far from his house, just beyond a stretch of road most kids avoided. But to Lucas, it was a doorway into another life. The moment he stepped beneath the canopy of leaves, the weight of the day began to lift. The whispers and laughter faded, replaced by the rustle of branches, the call of birds, and the low hum of crickets hidden in the grass. And there, in that sacred silence, he found his companion. The bear never came charging, never startled him. It appeared as though it had been waiting, a massive shadow slipping between the trees until it stood just a few feet away. Its presence was powerful yet calm, its dark eyes steady as if to say, "You're safe now." Lucas would sit on a fallen log, his voice soft as he recounted everything he couldn't say to anyone else. "They pushed me again today," he whispered once. The bear huffed quietly, lowering its head as though listening. On another day, Lucas showed its sketches from his notebook, drawings of animals, trees, and sometimes the bear itself. He never knew if the creature understood, but the act of sharing was enough. Those afternoons were the only time he felt whole. He wasn't bear boy or forest freak. He wasn't weak or strange. He was simply Lucas, a boy who belonged somewhere, even if that place wasn't among people his own age. Still, a small fear lingered. He knew if anyone else saw the bear, they would never understand. To them, it would be dangerous, something to control or drive away. That was why he kept the secret locked deep inside. What he didn't realize was that this bond, this unlikely friendship, would soon be tested in ways he couldn't imagine. Because the day was coming when Darren and his gang would push too far. And when that happened, the boy who had always been silent would finally have a voice. One spoken not in words, but through the roar of his bear. By the time spring rolled around, the bullying had reached a point Lucas could no longer ignore. Every day brought something new. An insult shouted across the hallway, a shove when teachers weren't looking, a cruel note slipped into his locker. Some days, it was almost predictable, like they had scheduled shifts just to remind him that he didn't belong. But what hurt more than the taunts was the silence of everyone else. The classmates who looked away, the teachers who offered weak warnings but never real consequences. It all told Lucas the same thing. He was alone. And that truth sat heavier than any shove or punch ever could. One Friday afternoon, it all came to a head. The final bell had just rung, and Lucas walked quickly through the side doors, hoping to make it to the forest before Darren and his friends noticed. But his luck ran out. "Where's Bear Boy rushing off to?" Darren called, his voice echoing across the parking lot. His gang trailed behind him, grinning like they already knew how the evening would end. Lucas kept his head down, adjusting his backpack straps and quickening his pace. The dirt path toward the woods wasn't far. If he could just reach it, he'd be safe. But heavy footsteps followed. "Slow down," one of the boys shouted. Another darted ahead, blocking his way. Lucas froze. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might shake his chest apart. Darren approached, that familiar smirk plastered across his face. "You know, I've always wondered," he said casually, "what exactly you do out there in those woods. Talking to squirrels? Singing with the birds?" The others laughed, closing in. Darren yanked Lucas's backpack off his shoulders and unzipped it with one swift motion. Books and papers spilled across the ground. His sketchbook landed open, its pages fanning out like fragile wings. "Ah, would you look at this?" Darren mocked, lifting a drawing of the bear. He's still doodling his imaginary friend. He waved the sketch at the others, who howled with laughter. "Tell me, Lucas, does her teddy bear keep you warm at night?" Lucas's fists clenched at his sides. Heat burned in his chest, anger rising like a storm he could no longer suppress. For years he had swallowed every insult, every shove, every cruel whisper. But seeing them mock the only friend he had, it was too much. "Give it back," he said, his voice low. Darren's smirk widened. "Or what?" He tore the sketchbook page in half, letting the pieces float to the ground. "You'll call your bear to come save you?" The gang erupted in laughter again, but there was no humor in it, only cruelty. Lucas lunged forward, trying to snatch the book from Darren's hands, but another boy shoved him hard. He stumbled, his knees scraping against the gravel. Pain shot up his leg, but he pushed himself up, trembling with rage. Pathetic, Darren sneered, dropping the sketchbook in the dirt and grinding it beneath his shoe. You can't even stand up without falling over. No wonder no one likes you. Lucas's throat tightened. His eyes stung. He wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything but stand there and take it. Yet his body refused. Every muscle locked, trapped between fury and fear. Darren stepped closer, his shadow swallowing Lucas's smaller frame. You need to learn your place, he said coldly. And if no one else is going to teach you, I guess it's up to me. The boys circled tighter, their laughter replaced by an unsettling quiet. One cracked his knuckles. Another shoved Lucas's backpack deeper into the mud. Lucas looked around, trees on one side, the road on the other. No escape. His chest heaved. His fists trembled. And for the first time in his life, he felt something inside him snap. I said, "Give it back," he shouted, his voice raw and louder than he had ever heard it. The words hung in the air, shocking even himself. Darren blinked, then smirked again, as though pleased by the challenge. "Finally," he said. "Maybe Bear Boy's got a spine after all." Before Lucas could react, Darren shoved him hard in the chest. He stumbled back, tripping over a root at the edge of the trail. The ground rushed up, knocking the breath out of him. Gravel bit into his palms, dirt filled his mouth. The boys closed in, looming over him like vultures circling a wounded animal. Lucas coughed, his vision blurred by tears and dust. His body screamed at him to move, but he couldn't. Not this time. Darren cracked his knuckles again, raising a fist. "Lesson 1, he sneered. "Never think you're better than the rest of us." Lucas braced himself, shutting his eyes tight. His heart raced, a sick mix of terror and fury. This was it, the moment everything broke. But then the air shifted. A deep rumble echoed through the trees, low and primal, vibrating through the earth beneath them. The laughter stopped instantly. The boys froze, their faces paling as the sound grew louder. Leaves rustled. Branches snapped. Something massive was moving in the shadows. Lucas opened his eyes, barely daring to breathe. And then he saw it. The forest seemed to fall silent, as if the entire world had paused to listen. That low, guttural rumble rolled through the air again. Closer now, heavier, impossible to ignore. Darren froze mid-motion, his raised fist hovering above Lucas like a threat suspended in time. The gang exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado cracking under the weight of something none of them could explain. Lucas lay on the ground, his breath shallow, his chest heaving. His eyes darted toward the tree line where the sound had come from. At first, it was only shadows shifting between the trunks. Then a massive figure emerged, the sunlight catching on thick, dark fur. The boys stumbled back instinctively. What is that?" one whispered, his voice trembling. Lucas's heart pounded so violently he thought it might burst. But when his eyes met that hulking form, recognition surged through him like a lifeline. It wasn't just any beast. It was his bear. The animal stepped into the clearing with slow, deliberate strides. Its shoulders rolled like waves of muscle, its claws sinking into the dirt with each heavy step. The air thickened with its presence, carrying an unspoken warning. This was no playground, and they had trespassed too far. Darren's smirk vanished. "No way," he muttered, backing up a step. This isn't real." But it was. The bear's gaze swept across the group of boys, its deep brown eyes unblinking, unreadable. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of someone's shaky breath. Then the bear let out a growl, deep and resonant, a sound that vibrated in their bones. One of Darren's friends bolted instantly, tripping over a root in his panic. He scrambled back to his feet and sprinted into the woods, his cries echoing like a warning bell. The others hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear, but the bear's next step forward was enough to shatter any illusion of courage. They scattered in different directions, their laughter gone, replaced by desperate gasps. Only Darren remained. His fists, once so confident, now hung limp at his sides. His eyes darted between Lucas, still sprawled on the ground, and the towering creature that now stood protectively between them. He tried to speak, but his words tangled on his tongue. It's just an animal," he stammered. "It's not." The bear took another step closer, lowering its massive head until its eyes were level with Darren's. The sound that followed was not quite a growl, but it carried enough weight to turn Darren's face pale. His chest rose and fell rapidly, every ounce of arrogance stripped away. For the first time, the boy who had ruled the hallways looked small, fragile. Lucas pushed himself up slowly, his palms stinging, his breath uneven. He stood just behind the bear, the creature's bulk shielding him from Darren's trembling form. And in that moment, something inside Lucas shifted. He wasn't cowering. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't the boy who shrank away from every insult. He was standing. "Go," Lucas said quietly, his voice steady in a way it had never been before. Darren blinked, stunned. What? "Leave," Lucas repeated, louder this time. His gaze locked on Darren's, no longer avoiding it. For once, he didn't look away. The bear rumbled again, as if echoing Lucas's command. Darren stumbled back, his sneakers skidding on the dirt. His bravado was gone, replaced by raw fear. Without another word, he turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush until his footsteps disappeared. The forest grew quiet again. Only the sound of the bear's breathing filled the air, slow, steady, grounding. Lucas's knees wobbled as adrenaline drained from his body. He reached out, his trembling hand brushing against the thick fur at the bear's side. The animal leaned slightly into the touch, as though to reassure him, "You're not alone." Hot tears pricked Lucas's eyes. For years he had been told he was weak, strange, worthless. But here, now, standing in the shadow of his protector, he realized the truth. He had always been stronger than they knew, because true strength wasn't fists or insults. It was loyalty. It was courage. It was friendship. The bear shifted its head, its deep eyes meeting his. No words passed between them, but Lucas felt it all the same. The bond, unspoken yet unbreakable. For a long moment, the two stood there, boy and bear, in the silence that followed the chaos. The forest seemed to exhale, as if relieved the storm had passed. Lucas wiped at his face, his breath finally steadying. "Thank you," he whispered. The bear rumbled softly, lowering its head until it brushed against his shoulder. It was a gesture of comfort, of reassurance, of protection. And for Lucas, it was the clearest reminder of all. He wasn't powerless anymore. News of what happened spread faster than Lucas ever expected. By Monday morning, whispers filled the school halls, not with mockery this time, but with awe. Some kids claimed they'd seen the bear themselves, towering above Darren and his gang like a creature out of legend. Others swore Lucas had somehow summoned, as if he held a secret power no one else could understand. For once, no one laughed at him. No one shoved him into lockers or scattered his books. Instead, people watched him with wide eyes, their voices lowered when they spoke his name. Even Darren, who had once thrived on humiliating him, couldn't bring himself to meet Lucas's gaze. The self-proclaimed king of the hallways had been dethroned by a boy he once called weak. But Lucas didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Power wasn't about scaring others or seeking revenge. He had learned that strength could come from something quieter, deeper, from standing tall even when the world tried to push him down. Every afternoon, he returned to the forest, following the same path until the trees closed in around him. And almost without fail, the bear was there, waiting. Sometimes they sat together in silence, the weight of the day easing from Lucas's shoulders. Other times, he whispered stories about school, about how things were changing, about how he finally felt seen. He knew the world might never truly understand their bond. To others, the bear would always be a wild animal, something to fear. But Lucas understood differently. He knew the truth, that the creature was more than a guardian. It was family, and with that bond came courage. No matter what lay ahead, Lucas no longer walked through life with his head bowed. He wasn't Bear Boy in the cruel way they had once meant it. Now, the name carried something else entirely: respect, even admiration. The boy who once felt invisible had found his place, not by becoming someone different, but by embracing exactly who he was. And in the quiet strength of his bear's presence, Lucas discovered the most powerful lesson of all: you don't need the world's approval to stand tall. Sometimes, you only need one true friend.